Hey everyone, welcome to the Low Carb Leader podcast. If you have been a listener, you probably realize that I don't ever do video, so this is a pretty cool day, and we have an awesome guest that I will uh, talk about here in a minute. But the video will be available on Facebook, on the Low Carb Leader Facebook page, and on YouTube, the Low Carb Leader. And the audio will be available where it usually is on iTunes or Stitcher or whatever podcast platform you use. So I'm excited about this, and if I can make it work, I will put the links below this video, and if you don't see the links, then I could not make it work. So I'll figure that out. So today's guest, nutritional therapy practitioner, restorative wellness practitioner, certified personal trainer, real food foodie, and passionate health seeker. She grew up on the standard American diet, as we all did, and then developed some problems in 2008, autoimmune disease, ulcerative colitis.
Yep.
And if I read it correctly, it took you a few years to kind of figure out that the diet was the cause of that, because on your website it said 2013 you finally started realizing what was happening. So, and she is the host of the Keto For Women show, which is a top-ranked podcast on iTunes. So welcome to the show, Shawn Mynar.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited to be the first person on video.
This is awesome.
It's great.
I hope it records.
Me too. That would be nice.
So Shawn,
we'll see.
Yeah, this is awesome. So you are in Boulder, Colorado?
I am.
Right.
Yes, I'm in Boulder, Colorado, although my business is all over the world, helping women basically with a ketogenic diet all across the globe. So it's a fun world to be in.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love keto, and this is kind of the second keto interview in October. We had keto and cancer last time, and then
oh, nice.
And then hopefully we'll have another one. I have struggled with scheduling Dominic D'Agostino. I've scheduled him several times. He's a busy guy, and so hopefully
that will be a great interview, though.
Get him on the show. Yeah. So Shawn, tell us your story. Go back to the very beginning and walk us through how you became a keto fan.
Yes. Okay. So like you mentioned in the intro, I grew up eating pretty much whatever I wanted, but within that, always being on a diet. I was someone who was a constant dieter. And I think now, back to that, the stress of all of that eventually led me to develop an autoimmune disease. And at the time, I was fine just doing what my doctor said, taking all these pills, seeing if it would go into remission, not worrying about my diet at all, and just kind of going with it. And then just kind of eventually that didn't work for me anymore. Like that just wasn't the solution that I was looking for. I didn't want to be on all of these pills for the rest of my life, just waiting to see if it would work or not. Like I just knew there had to be a better way. And so that's when I started doing some research. I turned to Dr. Google and found the paleo diet. Long story short, which, promotes real food, taking out the grains, taking out the sugar, all that stuff, and basically started that the very next day. And I had amazing results. I had really good results. I was able to get off some of the medication for the most part. I still had times that I wasn't in total remission, and but felt a lot better, had a lot more energy, and just felt really good. However, then slowly but surely that stopped working. And it was more so I was just getting these very random symptoms that didn't make any sense to me, like extreme fatigue, memory loss, brain fog, joint pain, very random, very significant weight gain over a short period of time, and just all these symptoms that didn't add up specifically for how well I was eating, how active I am, and I was confused. I was at a loss. So a lot of digging took place then. And that's when again, very long story short, I came across the fact that I was dealing with toxic mold exposure, and that was causing what is known as biotoxin illness in the body and chronic inflammatory response syndrome, to where your body just totally inflames because it doesn't know how to detoxify from these environmental toxins. And it was causing all kinds of these symptoms. It's very inflammatory for your brain. And when that happens, then you have this memory loss and leptin resistance and all this stuff. So that's when I started through a protocol. It was going really well, but I just wasn't seeing the full resolution that I wanted. I still wasn't feeling like myself. And that's when, I mean, at this point, I had already been a nutritionist for about 2 years. I basically became a nutritionist after I went paleo and realized how awesome it was. That spurred me to this career. But so I knew enough about nutrition to know that my next step would probably be the ketogenic diet. That was kind of like my last resort. Like, would this work? Could I get the healing benefits of these ketones to a point where I could reduce my inflammation, heal my brain, heal my leptin resistance, basically everything that was going wrong? It just kind of made sense that producing ketones could really help me. And that's when basically, again, Dr. Google confirmed that. And the next day I started my ketogenic diet. And that was over a year ago now. It's been about 13 months and it changed my life in a pretty short period of time.
So Shawn, going back, you said mold exposure. Was that in your house or apartment? Or how did you find out about the mold?
Yeah, so there was actually a couple different instances because it just kept following me. But yes, it originally started, Boulder, Colorado had a significant flood in 2013. I think it was 2013, maybe 2014. And I was in a home that flooded. And so there was remediation that happened. It was shoddily done. Didn't realize it for a whole nother year that there was mold growing in that home and that was the culprit. But then, I just found it and it made a lot of sense, with the whole timeline. And then I personally found that at that time, and then I moved again. And that home, I had an inspector come in just to make sure because I still wasn't feeling great, and he was able to find it.
Wow.
So, 2 instances. Yeah. It grows in a lot more places than we think, which is really scary.
Yeah, I've known actually a couple people that have been pretty negatively affected by mold. I know Dave Asprey, he probably
yes.
Yeah. He's like a mold detective. He even has like a Moldy, I think it's called, the documentary.
Yeah, that movie, it was one of the first things I watched, and to be like, oh my gosh, this sounds like me. Like that was my first clue to be like, I need to research this a little further.
So once you took care of the mold issue, did your symptoms start disappearing, or did you have to go keto to kind of get your, I'm going to call it UC, under check?
Yeah. So as far as the ulcerative colitis, so in that time as well of going through all this random health stuff, I also developed Hashimoto's, which is another autoimmune disease. So I now had 2 autoimmune diseases to work with. And basically, as I got out of the mold and started to detoxify from that, which is a very specific protocol, it's called the Shoemaker protocol, if anybody's interested. It's a very specific protocol that you have to go through to basically allow your body to heal from that. Like, you can't just leave and then you're fine. You have to do a lot of work. So that really helped me. And I got those autoimmune diseases into remission through that protocol, but it just wasn't enough. Like, I was feeling better, but I wasn't feeling like myself, which is 2 different things.
Right.
I naturally have a lot of energy and I wasn't there yet.
I think, don't worry, we'll get to keto in a minute, but I think, I think when people hear about like mold exposure and detoxification, I think, I don't know if it's a majority of people, but a lot of people will say, oh, that's kind of hokey stuff. And I've always been one of those where, detox or whatever, people do the detox protocols and all that. But, the more I read about it, because I had an infrared sauna and I try to do that like daily. And I read that there's so much environmental bad exposure now that, there's research about babies being born with all these toxins in their bodies. And I read that it could take up to 2 years or more of every day in the sauna to get some of these heavy metals out. And I'm sure mold is everywhere. And so my point in saying all this is this is a real thing. This isn't something that you just hear about and you're like, whatever, the detox and heavy metals and all that. It's a real issue now in the environment we live in, right?
Yeah, it is a real issue. I think it's becoming more prominent, even just, the toxins and the chemicals and stuff in our food, right? Like, that's just becoming harder to find. although I think we're getting more awareness around that now. But as far as the environmental stuff goes, and it's specifically with mold or Lyme-carrying ticks is another one that is, we're kind of in the same class of these biotoxin illnesses. There's actually 25% of the population that has the gene that does not allow them to actually detoxify from it properly. So, in 75% of the people, you get exposed to mold, you leave, and your body eventually rids itself of it. And then in 25%, that doesn't happen. And that's when this inflammatory response happens. So, yeah, I mean, it's people like my friends and family, and they don't quite understand what I went through or what is happening. They're like, oh, you just have this mold allergy. And it's like, no, that's not the same thing. But it's very common to not quite understand it. But then the amount of people that I talk to that are having all of these random health issues that they cannot heal, my thought is, what's your environment?
Right. That's exactly how I think too. So Keto for Women. So your show is about women. So let's start with the obvious. What's the difference between men and women?
Yes. Right. Well, it sums up to one word, and that is hormones, which I'm sure you can guess.
I thought that would be better if you said that, not me.
Yeah. Yeah, good idea. Yes. So it is actually, I just honestly found this out through going through my own journey with it. And keto is such an awesome tool for us to use for our health. But in women, it can also be kind of detrimental if you don't take it on the right way. So a lot of women will go from doing one thing one day, and then the next day they're eating 0 carbs and excuse me, and really cutting down their calories, and it can really cause some stress on your body to do it that way. And so when we have stress, especially as women, although men see this too, but especially as women, our hormones just freak out. They just do. Any chance that our hormones can get to go out of balance, it will happen. And stress is the culprit for most of the reasons why that would happen. So I just kind of found this out myself, and then working with clients one-on-one and getting them into ketosis and just seeing this difference that needs to happen between men and women in order for the women to get the same benefits that their husband or friend or whatever is getting, but in a different way. We need to tweak it a little bit.
So what are some of the common, they're not really problems, but issues that people have when they want to become ketogenic? What I see is that, they'll be all gung-ho and they'll be like, okay, I'm going to go get my avocados and my macadamia nuts and my bacon. And I got an issue with that too. I don't, there's the ketogenic people that are like, I just eat bacon all day. And I think you need a healthy balance. I think you need your greens and your vegetables.
Definitely.
And eating bacon all day. I'm sure you're ketogenic, but I don't know if it's the.
But is it a health promoting state?
Yeah. So when people start, do you see that they'll be too gung-ho at the beginning and then they fall off, or what's the typical type of problems you see when people start this?
Well, there's a lot of them, but I would say the biggest ones, and that is definitely one where they are very gung-ho right away. And there's so much information. It's almost information overload right now in the ketogenic community. And there's a lot of rules and weird restrictions and things that just don't make sense. And there's conflicting information, and it's very confusing. And so a lot of women will take all those rules and apply it all immediately, and not consider what is working for them, what their body needs, how they're actually feeling, and what modifications they should make. So there's not a whole lot of intuitiveness, I find, for a lot of people in ketogenic diets, but there should be, because there's a lot of room to find out what works for you. And that's something I'm really big on. I also find that for women, or really just in general, although I don't think it's as pronounced in men, you think you're doing the ketogenic diet, but you're actually not. And so you're really super restricting your carbs down to pretty much nothing, but you haven't increased your fat.
Right.
And so then you're just on this super low food diet. Your body does not like that. Trust me, I've seen it time and time again. Your body does not like that. And then you don't feel good. You start missing your cycles. Things start happening and you think, oh, keto doesn't work. Keto is not good.
Right.
But you weren't actually there.
Right. Exactly.
You know?
Yeah. When I first started, fat, we've been told for so long that fat is so bad for you. And it was years ago, and my son was like, you should try this low carb thing. And he kept on saying you have to eat, you should really go to 70-30 beef or 80-20 ground beef. And I'm like, no, I need lean. And so what I did, I think a lot of people do this, you cut out carbs and then I cut down the fat. And it was, I think I was dying. It was horrible. It was horrible. And he's like, you can't do this. So the more I started reading, you can't lower your carbs and then say, well, I'm going to keep my fat down too.
Totally.
You need something. You need something. And, I know Joseph Mercola, he's like a keto guy too. And he talks a lot about the mistake of having your protein way too high when you're trying to stay ketogenic. And I've actually monitored my ketones, and I thought, to what you were saying, I thought I was ketogenic for a long time, and I don't think I was because my protein was so high, and that was a mistake that I made.
Yes, and that's a very common one too. And I think it again comes from the past where we've heard we need all this protein to like build our muscle and keep us lean, and so just go for the protein. And that's not the case if you're trying to get into ketosis, because you can have a blood sugar response from protein just as much as you can from carbohydrates, especially if it's a very lean cut of protein. You're not getting any fat with it or anything else to kind of moderate that. So it's something, again, where you do have to kind of find that balance of basically the macronutrients that your body needs to get you into ketosis. And it's different for everybody. That's what people don't understand.
Right. So most of the people that come to you, I take, most of them are women, I'm guessing. Right?
Yes.
Are they on the typical standard American diet, or are they low carbers that are trying to get into keto, or the paleo trying to get into keto? Who are the people you are seeing?
Most of them are probably paleo trying to get into keto, I would say, or low carb trying to get into keto. Both of those are pretty prominent. And that's kind of the situation where you don't understand how much fat you need to actually produce ketones. Like, we need those fatty acids to produce the ketones in our body. So there's a purpose to that, right? So, and not to mention when you need enough food, and obviously fat is very nutrient dense if you're getting good high quality fats, which is the only thing I promote to do. And you're getting enough calories, you're getting enough energy, but you also need those fatty acids for so many other things, and they're very healing, and they don't spike your blood sugar.
Right. So,
that's what you need.
The positive or the favorable type of fats, avocado, olive oil, macadamia nuts.
Yeah, nuts and seeds. I like fattier cuts of meat, like we were talking about. I think that's great. I really love making my own mayo, avocado oil mayo. It's so good, and it's such a great way to make a sauce. You can make a sauce with just put some other kinds of spices in there, and so you can make dressings and things like that. And I make all my own homemade dressings, which is really important. So you're just kind of topping it with that. Butter or ghee, I think, is great. Coconut oil, all that kind of stuff. The usual stuff. Right.
So the fattier cuts of meat, I think we have to be careful about. Yeah, because here's the catch-22. Organic or grass-fed, actually grass-fed meat is more expensive than the kind of the CAFOs, the regular super Walmart meat, which is just horrible.
Scary.
Nothing against Walmart.
No, but
don't sue me. But we say eat more fatty cuts of meat, and then you go to the supermarket and you get a cheap cut of fatty meat, and then all the toxins go into the fat from these cow producing factories. And so I think you have to be careful, because if you're not eating a good quality cut of meat and you're eating all the fat like on a ribeye or something, it could actually be somewhat damaging for you, right?
Totally. Yeah. And that's something that I promote hardcore in everything that I do on my podcast and in my group and all that stuff, because the quality of the food is of utmost importance when you're doing a ketogenic diet. I don't believe it, what I call it, nutrient dense keto. Like there has to be that. And like you mentioned, even making sure you're having veggies. I'm on a high veggie keto diet. I think that's really important too. And it should be organic. And like you said, with the meats, I only recommend organic, grass-fed, grass-finished beef for sure, because then the difference is, and yes, it is more expensive, but if you're thinking about, think about buying a multivitamin, you could be getting that just in your food. You could be getting those nutrients and saving your money on that multivitamin if you actually get these really high quality meats, because then that fat goes from toxic and super inflammatory to very rich in omega-3s, very anti-inflammatory and really good for us.
Right. And the same with olive oil, it's
totally.
I just read an article that said it can be supplemented with all these non-olive oils. And if it says it's from Italy, there's some catch that it just has to be like shipped through the country or something. It doesn't even need to be from the country. So, and I wish I had the link. I can put the link in the show notes, but there's a olive oil website that kind of says these have been tested to be real olive oil. And, olive oil is great for you as long as you're eating high quality olive oil. If you're eating a bunch of olive oil that's cut with cheaper stuff, then you're counterproductive.
You're not doing what you think you're doing.
Yeah. I think a lot about that. Yeah. Making sure
the majority of those oils on the shelves too aren't of good quality. Like you have to be super picky. And yes, it is most likely going to be the most expensive one. But there's a reason for that. And I think you can also, again, it's kind of worth it to spend a little bit more because the taste is so much better. The texture is so much better. Like you really are, it really does make a difference. And that not only is the quality so much better, but even if you're not super concerned about that, the taste is so much better.
Yeah, I saw a big difference. There's on the olive oil, there's one brand out of Whole Foods that made the list, and it's like $7 a bottle, but it tastes so good. And I think for the Trader Joe people that are out there, there's like 3 brands, so it's not going to cost you like $50 a bottle. There are some better brands that are lower cost, but yeah. So the takeaway here is, you can't just go ketogenic and eat a bunch of subpar type of foods, because it is not going to result in reduced inflammation and more energy. And it's going to probably make you feel just as bad as you did, I'm guessing.
Yeah. And I mean, like short term, I know a lot of people in the keto community, the reason why they turn to it is for weight loss. So short term, you may see like, oh, I'm eating bacon and cheese and meat all day, and look, I'm down 20 pounds. But I promote keto for health, not really for weight loss. That might come as you get healthy, but I am interested in the health benefits of it. And so long term, continuing to eat that way, you're probably not going to see these like blood markers change as much as you want to see if you don't start thinking about the quality. And that's why the veggies are such an important piece to that, even for your gut health. Reducing your inflammation, reducing your cholesterol. Like you have to have that fiber and those vegetables and just those micronutrients too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, that's very interesting. So, what is the biggest problem? So, like, I would hear somebody say, "Oh, I'd love to go low carb or keto, but I can't give up my bread." What is your? I'm sure you have heard that. What is your answer to? I just can't do it. I just can't change my lifestyle that way.
I actually have a client who said that to me not even 2 weeks ago, and it was a battle. It took a couple weeks for her to get her head wrapped around it. And, my advice is to just try it. Just try it. Give yourself, make a little bit of a commitment to give it 4 to 6 weeks. Maybe that would be enough for you to see a change. it might be more like 2 months that you might need to commit, but just say you're just going to do it. You're just going to try it. You're going to find new things that you do love, that you can eat as much of it as you want. Maybe you love eggs and you can have some eggs, which you thought were bad previously or something. So, and just see what happens, because the only way that you're going to know if it's something that works for you or not is if you see how your body responds to it. You will, if you're used to eating bread, you will more than likely feel amazing. And then you will understand like those, that's why it's like, I don't even really have to do a whole lot of coaching, because it speaks for itself.
Right. Right.
Like give yourself that time and you're going to notice, oh my gosh, I'm sleeping so much better. My fatigue in the middle of the day is gone. My joint pain is gone. I feel so much more vibrant and energized. Well, then is the bread really worth it to go back to?
Right. And for those that have been keto, or those that are thinking about it, your hunger goes away.
Yes.
I mean, I talk about this in just about every podcast when we talk about low carb, but I literally, I'll have bulletproof coffee in the morning just because I like it. I like the taste of it. And it gives me a lot of energy, the MCT. But it'll be 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'll be like, oh, I should probably eat something. Just because all the hunger signals really diminish greatly on a ketogenic diet, at least for me. Do you experience that?
Yes, absolutely. And the cravings. And so the same client, I just talked to her yesterday, and she was very proud of herself because on Mondays some day this week, they had a huge spread of all these baked goods, which they do at work. And she, not only did she say no, but she just didn't have any interest in it.
That's awesome.
Like it's just not worth it. And even if you have a bite and you realize like really, truly your taste buds change and it just becomes so sweet, it's almost too sweet to even be enjoyable if you're having these like traditional sugary things that you're not used to. So that makes it worth it too.
Yeah. So when you put somebody on keto, it may be individual specific, I'm sure, but do you typically recommend staying on keto long-term or cycling on and off?
I think it really depends. I'm all for the keto lifestyle. That's what I promote. And so that means that you might go on vacation like I did last week and have some wine and some chocolate and not stay in ketosis. And it's fine. My life didn't change. Everything's fine. I still felt great. I got back into ketosis when I came home. Life's good. So I think if you start thinking, oh, I need to be on this long term, or, oh, I need to cycle, then it becomes a little bit more of this like math equation or this kind of like strict, rigid thing that it just doesn't have to be.
Right.
I think that if you know how you feel when you eat a certain way, like, okay, when I eat this much fat, this much protein, and this much carbohydrate throughout one day, I feel really good. And so majority of the time, I'm probably going to do that because I want to feel good majority of the time. But then if there's certain times where you go out to dinner with friends and there's sweet potato fries or I don't know, something, and you eat them, so be it. That's great. It's life. It's part of being the lifestyle that we want to lead that can be a very health promoting and healing lifestyle, but taking out that stress of like, oh, I can't ever eat bread again. I can't ever eat this and that again because I have to be in ketosis.
Yep. I agree. Yeah. If you go into it thinking that you can never do it again, I think you're going to fail.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, you go on vacation and I say, eat what you want, mm-hmm. But after you've been ketogenic or low carb for a long time, you won't typically go on binges. Exactly. I mean, you'll see the food, and like what I'll do is I do more of sampling. I'll try something and I'll be like, oh, that's good, but I won't eat a loaf of bread. I might eat a piece when I'm on vacation or whatever. But I have no desire to gorge myself on all this stuff. I like a little pasta and a little bread. I think, like you said, your tastes change, and now I've been on it for a long time too, and now you're like, oh, I don't know if I want to eat that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
well, it's just not.
Yeah.
Like, does the slight flavor, something you haven't had in a while, match how you're going to feel afterwards? Like if I have a piece of bread, I'm probably going to feel like bloated and tired and not all that great. So is it really worth it? Probably not. And you just haven't had it in so long that I personally, I have no interest in eating bread. And then, for instance, when I was on vacation, they had this amazing chocolate, like factory chocolate place there. And their darkest was 70%. And I had like a little truffle and it was like, man, this is sweet. So again, it's not like, okay, I'm going to buy all the chocolates and eat all of them in one day, like a binge type situation. It's like, okay, that was great, but that was a little sweet for me. I don't know if I need to continue doing that. It was a good treat and that's it.
Yeah. I'm sure some listeners or viewers right now are saying like, what do you mean 70%? Which is funny because I was going to bring up that point of most of the chocolate I eat now, and it's very small portions, is 85%, or 80% dark chocolate. But when there is a 70%, it's kind of like, oh man, that's cheating. And I couldn't imagine eating a Snickers.
Oh, right.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Because even 80% is like pretty sweet. Like right now, sweet to me is like 80% chocolate. And if I eat a bowl of blueberries, I'm like, holy cow, this is like, am I eating pure sugar? It's your taste just totally change. And it really doesn't take that long. Right.
Right. It's very quick. And that's kind of one of the things specifically for women that I think is so great is because so many of us deal with like binge tendencies, especially around our cycles. And, just a lot of women don't feel like they have any control around their emotions around food. And there's a lot of that going on in all communities. But then in keto, you have the ability to take that away. And to finally feel like I tell people this all the time. For the first time in my life, like I mentioned, I'd been kind of a chronic dieter pretty much my whole life. But for the first time ever, when I went keto, I felt totally in control of my appetite and my cravings and everything. So I could actually be intuitive for the first time ever and just eat when I was hungry and stop when I was satisfied, not have these binges and not feel like I was missing out on anything and not feel like I was dieting. Which I think is so important.
You mentioned the menstrual cycle. Does ketogenic diet help regulate around before and after? Have you found that with your clients? Because, I was married at one point and there's difficult times during the month, right? And
yes.
I'm wishing she would have been on a ketogenic diet. but anyway, so have you, because I know that's a really hard time for women around that. So have you found that that's been pretty helpful?
Yes, significantly helpful for people that have, women that have hormonal imbalances, making their cycles either absent or very tough. Now, the kicker here, which is, if you have females listening, they're like, well, it didn't work for me. The kicker here is you have to be in ketosis. So if you notice something that, like you miss a cycle or your period is getting worse, check your ketones and make sure that you are actually in ketosis and not doing this like low carb, low food diet that we talked about before. That's the difference. Once you get into ketosis, and this is why I promote it so hard for women, is because it does such great things for your menstrual cycle and regulating those hormones. And I have so many women now that their cycles come and go and they barely even notice. It's just like another day.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's just so great.
So you mentioned measuring ketones. So do you recommend the blood? Or I know a lot of people do the cheap way with the keto sticks and the urine, but that has its downside as well, right? The urine sticks.
Yes, I do not recommend the keto sticks, which are the urine sticks. They will very quickly become inaccurate for you, and then it gets really frustrating, because you just don't know what's going on. You can't get an accurate measurement of, because this is why I like to test for ketones, and I do recommend the blood ketone meter. But this is why I like to test, is not to like get super obsessed with it or anything like that, but to get information for your body. So if you have a really great day where you feel awesome, testing your ketones will be like, okay, this is the level of ketones that I need to be in to feel really good. Or if you have a day where you kind of feel crappy, low energy, then you can also test and find that out. Like, okay, if I get this low, then I'm not getting that energy boost or getting the health boost from these ketones. So you just are finding more information out about your body, which is really important in my practice. So yes, the blood ketone meter does that because not only is it telling you when you're in ketosis or not, but it's also giving you a very specific number.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a great tip right there.
Yeah. So, if it's like, yeah, you're in ketosis, but it's at, the range is 0.5 to 3.0 is technically nutritional ketosis. If you're at 0.5 and you're feeling kind of, then okay, probably a little bit deeper state of ketosis would be better for me. And then you have this great day and you test and you're at 1.2, then it's like, okay, so what I did is working and I feel really good here and now I can stay there. And those meals that I had previous to this get me into a nice state of ketosis.
And the strips are somewhat expensive, but what I found is you can go on Amazon and get it by a reseller, and you can get them down to like $3 a strip, which is still expensive. But the point there is, yeah, you don't need to be taking them every single day. But I like your approach of if you feel really good, take them and see where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
I would do it when I did a couple 5-day fasts, and I would do it every day just to see where I am. And we'll talk about intermittent fasting real quick, because a lot of people will say, oh, I intermittent fast for, they do the 16-8 lean gains or whatever. And
yep.
What I have found, at least personally, is my ketones, it's day 3, it's 72 hours where they get really high. So I think people think, oh, I'm going to skip breakfast and my ketones are going to soar. I don't think that happens with anybody, I'm guessing, because it definitely doesn't happen with me. I think intermittent fasting is good. But if you're going to do fasting to get your ketones up, it's going to take more than 8 hours fasting.
Yeah, it's going to take a longer time. Yes, for sure. And I mean, it will help if you're doing a ketogenic diet on those 8 hours you're eating, like a true ketogenic diet, and having that 16-hour fast. It might help you get into ketosis a little faster. Quicker and maybe a little deeper quicker, but it's not going to be like all of a sudden you're skyrocketing ketones. No, you would definitely need a longer fast for that.
So do you do any certain eating window, like fasting, or you just kind of eat whenever?
Yeah, I just kind of eat whenever. When I was needing some deeper healing in this whole mold protocol situation, I did fast. I actually did alternate day fasting. And I actually really liked it. My body, I had certain things that it did wonders for, specifically my inflammatory markers, my immune system. I felt really good in that regard, but it was a little stressful on my body, which I kind of found out in the middle of it. So now I just kind of eat whenever. I do prefer to work out fasted. So I work out in the morning. So I probably have about a 16-8 window just naturally because I enjoy working out fasted. But as far as intermittent fasting for women, I also think that is another tool basically in the toolbox that you can use to optimize your health. And, we both agree that it has a ton of health benefits. But like I mentioned, for me, it also was a stressor. So you have to make sure that you are really listening to your body, really looking for any signs that maybe it's not the right time for you, or maybe you need to shorten your fasting window or, spread it out a little bit. You really have to be in tune with your body in order to do it to its maximum potential and not cause more issues down the road.
Yeah. And going to intermittent fasting or extended fasting, I know like Jimmy Moore, he's like done long fast, but like crazy fast, but
I don't think I could do that.
yeah. Bone broth for like 30 days or something. Yeah, no thanks. But going from a standard American diet, going from junk food every day, and then saying, I'm going to start fasting is very, very difficult.
Yes.
If not impossible. You have to be low carb keto. And then intermittent fasting, it almost happens naturally because you're just not hungry. But going from Big Mac one day to fasting the next, it's overwhelming.
Yeah. And your body is not ready for that. So I always recommend people get into ketosis and be there for, probably 3 to 5 weeks, be in a nice deep state of ketosis continuously, and then try fasting. Because by then you're having that ketone production, you're already seeing some really good health benefits and just feeling quite a bit better. And then you can see if, I feel like that also gives you the ability to tap into your body a little bit more. And so then you can see, fasting is making me feel even better, or fasting is making me feel a little worse.
Right. Right.
And that's when kind of how to do it. And for women specifically, you will notice potentially changes in your menstrual cycle or your sleep. Like if your sleep starts becoming interrupted, this might be the case for men too, for as far as the sleep one goes, at least. Hair loss. These are all signs that is too much stress on your body, because not eating is a stressful scenario on your body. Now, if you have good adrenal health and you've been working on your cortisol regulation, then it's going to be fine. That's going to be great. Your body's going to be able to handle that. It's just most of us aren't quite there. Most of us have some sort of adrenal dysfunction.
Right. Great point. Exogenous ketones. What's your thought there? Because for those who have heard any podcast of mine before this, the problem I have with them is that they're marketed as this shortcut to ketosis. Mm-hmm. So you can eat a piece of chocolate cake and then take this, and then the world's great. But you miss the whole process of, just because you have ketones in your body doesn't mean that you're doing the right thing. You miss the whole process of being in ketosis. But I've interviewed a few people who say from an athletic performance standpoint, they're really good. So they have their use. But do you have a lot of women especially, just because that's most of the people I know that have started taking these exogenous ketones, but do you see that a lot? They just try to use it as a shortcut, or they still want to eat the regular food and then use this supplement, which, by the way, is very expensive.
Mm-hmm. Yes, I call it one of the biggest wastes of money out there for the keto community. But yes, I do see that quite a bit, although hopefully most of my listeners know that that's not the route to go, because one of the best and biggest benefits about being in a ketogenic state or doing a ketogenic diet is the regulation of your blood sugar. That's what's healing so many of these things that you feel. And if you're coming from a standard American diet or even a quote unquote healthy diet or paleo diet or whatever, you can still have blood sugar dysregulation very easily. So if you're coming from that is just such an amazing benefit of going through the process of getting into ketosis. And you don't have to do that if you are taking these exogenous ketones, yet you still prick your finger and you get a reading on the meter and it's like, oh, I'm doing it. So no, it's definitely a side swipe, it's a roundabout way. And I hate to say it, it's kind of a negative word, but I think it's cheating. So cheating the system a little bit. But I do have people because there's like almost this stigma around getting into ketosis where it's like, as soon as you produce that number on your ketone meter, magic happens. And you have this, it's like a unicorn comes down and makes everything great in your life. So people just want that so badly, and they're willing to spend this much money on this supplement to get there. The hard part is that that's not actually what happens. Yes, you are going to feel good getting into ketosis, but I always tell people you are getting into ketosis to start the healing process. It's not that you produce ketones and everything's fine and your life is dandy. You have to then go through that process of healing whatever is the reason as to why you have excess weight, why your hormones are out of balance, whatever you're dealing with. So it's just, you have to go through that process. And part of that is changing your diet to that degree to where you can do that on your own. It's that diet change that is doing so much more for you.
Right. There's no shortcuts. There's no shortcuts. That's,
we all want them, and we all keep looking for them.
Yeah. I said, if there's a pill I could take so I could eat pizza every single day and feel great, I would, they could charge me $10 a pill. But yeah, I mean, it's the same thing with, P90X, or everybody wants these really quick ways to get in shape. And And I think if you just kind of take this holistic approach and, you know, get your sleep right and get your stress in check and eat right and sleep, you'll feel better. You know, people want to sleep 3 hours a night and they wonder why they can't lose weight. They wonder why they don't feel well. You can change your diet, but if the other parts of your life are out of order, you know, it's going to be
not going to happen.
Yeah, it's not going to happen. So this is an awesome discussion, but we are running out of time. But before we go, so a couple questions. What foods do you love that you don't eat anymore?
Ooh, I would say, even though we had this talk about sweet tooth changing and all that, I'm
thinking chocolate might be on that list.
Yes, although I do still eat it. Although, like, I'm now actually up to 100% dark chocolate, and I can actually eat that,
that's bitter. Yeah.
Crazy. But I am always drawn to baked goods of any sort, like cake or like pumpkin bread or anything like that. I don't eat it unless I've actually come up with a few keto recipes, which is nice. So I can eat some of that stuff, but I'm just very drawn to that. And I even like cupcakes or something like that and don't ever eat them. Yeah. Obviously. Yeah. I probably should try, because I'd realize I don't even like them anymore. Like frosting is probably way too sweet for me at this point.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's just sickening. Yeah. Yeah. I used to like to eat donuts. I couldn't imagine eating a donut now.
No. I mean, just how bad would you feel afterwards? Just like it sitting in your stomach like a rock.
Yeah. Yeah. So, what are some takeaways, for the people on a standard American diet right now that say, how do I get started? And then what about maybe a tip or two, and then a tip or two for low carbers that want to get into ketosis? So let's start with the regular diet. Yeah,
I would say for standard American diet, I really truly think that just getting yourself into a real food diet is the first step. So eliminating all the packaged and processed foods, basically anything that comes in a bag or a box or has a nutrition label that you have to read to see what's in it. Although there are some good stuff out there too, but just if you see anything on that label that you don't know what it is, then that means your body doesn't know what it is. So I think that really is the first step because once you do that, you realize that the processed and packaged foods that you're eating, even if it's something like yogurt or whatever, is really causing you to be in this really high carb diet. So you take that stuff out and you're automatically getting into this more low carb approach. And then from there, so I would say do that for, a month or two at least. And then you can look more into the ketogenic type approach, which is basically taking that and significantly increasing your fat intake. So finding all these really good fats that we talked about, adding those into your every single meal, and then more focusing on getting your carbohydrates from vegetables, and maybe some nuts and seeds and avocado and things like that. So that's kind of the step. But I think standard American, let's just clean up the diet first.
Right. Great point. And there can be, the way I approach it is, well, I'm on the low carb side, but I know how much protein I'm going to eat for my weight. I try to keep it around 70 grams. It's like half of my lean body mass. And then I keep my carbs low, and then everything else is good fat. So that's like the staple of it. And so, but you do have to, fat is, nutrient dense. So it's, 9 calories. So you can, even though you can lose weight on ketogenic, you can go overboard. So you got to be careful not to go overboard, right, with the fat. So you can't be like, almond butter seems to be the, where people will just like eat tons of almond butter. Well, there's a lot of calories, so you could actually kind of defeat the purpose if you're trying to lose weight. You still have to look at your macros and your total calories, right?
Yes, and I think at least for women, and I actually think this is probably the case for men too, it's actually easier to go the other way where you're not eating enough. So because that's something we talked about, fat is also super satiating. So if you're going to have a half a jar of almond butter, then like you're not going to eat the rest of the day because you're going to be stuffed. So, if you add this fat to the right quantity, then you're eating 2 or 3 meals a day. And they're very balanced and whatever. And you end up eating probably about right where you should be as far as the amount of energy or calories without really trying. What usually ends up happening is people do this whole approach, and like I said, they don't increase their fats enough.
Right.
And that's when we just become too low calorie, because they're like, yeah, I still have to only eat 1 tablespoon of oil at each meal. And that's not enough, especially if you're taking out all those carbs and that protein too.
And especially if you're eating a lot of vegetables, they fill me up.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So, so a low carber that wants to get into keto, what would be the first step?
Really I guess there are a few steps, but the biggest step is to really take a hard look at how much fat you're eating and probably double it. Like, just based on what I've seen, I tend to tell people going from low carb or paleo or whatever to make sure they're having at least 3 servings of fat at each meal at minimum. And maybe even you have a snack in there that's also fat-based too. So that's kind of a good staple. And just assuming, I mean, I don't like to really get into like measuring foods or anything like that, but like a tablespoon of oil is going to be 1 serving. So having at least 3 servings of fat to get started at each meal while keeping your carbs low. And then of course you have to find that protein intake that's right for you, which is a little different for everybody, but it's probably going to be, if you're someone that's coming from this more paleo template, it's probably going to be something less than you're used to eating. And all that means, it doesn't mean that you have to like skip a protein source at a meal or anything. It just means lowering, making that your actual serving smaller. So just make your burgers a little smaller.
Right. What's your take on fruit?
I mean, I think that fruit, I hate to demonize anything because fruit's obviously a great source of nutrients. I think that people rely on it a little bit too much. So I have no problem, even with ketogenic diet, of you having some berries or something like that occasionally if it works and it keeps you in ketosis and you feel really good. But it's more so, are you eating a little bit too much? Are you relying on that too much for your carbohydrate source when you could get it from vegetables instead?
Yeah, I try to just think seasonally, when we were paleo people a long time ago, fruit wasn't available all the time like it is now. So, I try to think like what would be available. That's why I live in St. Louis and we got this killer farmers market, and that kind of tells you what's in season. That's what I like. So if you try to eat seasonally, that will keep your fruit in check. That's kind of how I think about it, because I don't know, in the Midwest, we don't have banana trees and we don't have mango trees. And, some of that stuff is pretty high sugar. If you're eating mangoes, and I don't even know, because all I ever eat are like blueberries. I'll eat some berries, but like some of that fruit has ton of sugar, figs and stuff like that. That stuff probably should be avoided.
Yeah, the dried fruit is a different story because it's very packed with sugar. And again, if you are going through this ketogenic phase and you get into it, then your taste for these really high sugar fruits is going to change anyways, and you're not going to want it. Like blueberries, strawberries, raspberries, those are going to be plenty as far as, craving, getting that sweet tooth craving out of the way.
Yeah, they're very, very sweet. So we are out of time. So Shawn, before we go though, tell us about your killer podcast that you have going on, Keto For Women show, and all the other resources and how somebody can get a hold of you.
Yeah, sure. So yes, the Keto For Women show, it's out there anywhere you listen to podcasts. It's all over. And it's really just me. Most of the time, it's just me answering questions about the ketogenic diet that I've had submitted from my listeners. So that's really fun, and I love doing it. I also have the Fat Burning Female Project. It's coming up. I do it about once every other month, and it's a 6-week course that takes women into a ketogenic state from wherever they are now, safely and effectively. So we make sure to kind of avoid all those triggers that could make it a stressful scenario. So that's really fun. I have that too. And then I have my website, just ShawnMynar.com, where I share recipes and just stuff about me, just my life. And then I'm on Instagram. I do quite a bit on Instagram, especially on Instagram stories, if you want to see like my day-to-day life. And that's at Shawn Mynar Health, Instagram and Facebook.
Oh, that's awesome. All right. Well, the audio and video sync on you has went apart. So just like like the last 20 seconds. So people watching are probably like, what in the world? So I'll put everything in the show notes. But thank you so much for being here. This has been an awesome audio and video podcast. And
love it.
and you have set history here. You are the first video podcast. Yeah. So
well, I hope it works.
Yeah. Well, I hope I hit the right button. So Shawn, thank you so much for being on the show today. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. It was a great conversation.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.